What's up, my people, and welcome to the channel. My name is Diamond, and thank you for watching. This video is dedicated to my subscriber Jeremy, who asks, can you do a video on everything that has to do with leasing, focusing mainly on that concept? How does it work? The pros, the cons, can you trade it in? What makes people lease, etc. And that's exactly what I'm gonna get into in this video. So thank you, Jeremy, for the suggestion. If you have a video idea or something you want me to talk about, be sure to leave those in the comments section because I'm here to help you. And if you haven't done so, now is the perfect time to click the subscribe button in the corner of the video so that you can become part of the community. And don't forget to enable your notifications so you don't miss out on anything. Let's start with explaining the concept of leasing. The concept of leasing a car is pretty straightforward. It's like renting a car. In fact, it is renting a car. Just like when you go to the airport and pick up a rental, you pick out a car, you determine how long you want to keep it, you drive off the lot with it, and after a predetermined amount of time, you go ahead and return that car in the same condition that you took it in, and then you get to turn in the keys, walk away, and you never have to think about that car again. That's the concept of leasing, the exact same thing. So why is it that something so simple gets so complicated so fast? And that's because when you're leasing a car, you're technically not borrowing money. So the terminology that's involved in a lease agreement is a lot different than what you're used to hearing when you're financing a car. And like anything in life, if you don't understand it, it's easy for you to get confused. It's easy for you to sign a bad deal and get ripped off. So this video is going to explore these different terminologies that's involved in a lease and the different parts of a lease so that you can have the right information to decide whether leasing is the right move for you. So who is leasing for and why do we lease cars? This is a loaded question because on one hand, you can have a car salesman who will tell you leasing cars is for sophisticated people who understand how to leverage their dollar. It's for someone who wants to enjoy the luxuries that a new car can bring and swap out their car every 2 to 4 years to stay ahead of the technology, to stay ahead of the depreciation, all while keeping their monthly costs as low as possible. On the other hand, you can have someone who says, leasing a car is for people who don't have their financial priorities in order. It's the most expensive way to drive a vehicle and is really for people who don't know how to do math. Both of these points are making some valid arguments. And to understand that, let's take a look at the pros and cons of leasing. The biggest pro of leasing a car is that your monthly payments is lower than if you purchase the same car. The reason they're lower is because you're only paying for the depreciation of the vehicle while you have the car. And this is all predetermined before you ever leave the dealership. Versus when you buy a car, you're paying for the entire purchase price of the car. The con on this is that at the end of the lease, you don't walk away with anything. All the money you spent on your lease is just that, it's gone. And so the only thing you have at the end is the enjoyment and the memories of driving that car. Another pro is that since your monthly payments are typically cheaper on a lease, people can lease more cars than they could otherwise buy. And that's why you see leasing as a very popular option on luxury brands. But the con to this is the same as the first one. At the end of the day, you turn in the lease and you're done, and the money you spent is gone forever. You're left with the memories that you created while driving the car, and hopefully you got however much you spent, you got that much enjoyment out of it because you walk away with no car and no keys. Another pro that makes leasing popular is that you can get a new car every 2 to 4 years, with the typical lease being 36 months. But this has two cons because the first one is cars are typically the second most expensive thing we buy, only second to our homes. And even though they come out with new models every single year, cars was never meant to be replaced every 2 to 4 years. And since it's a depreciating asset, it's really throwing money out the window. So buying a car is not really about how much you're willing to spend. It's really a question of how much money are you willing to waste. Because regardless of how much you spend on your car, it don't change the utility of the car, and the vehicle still gets you from point A to point B. The second con is that when you finance a car for 5 years, you pay it off and you drive it for another 5 years, every month that you're driving that car after it's paid off is reducing your total cost of ownership. But when you lease a car, you lock in your monthly payment. And if you go into a second or third lease, you've turned your car payment into a utility bill. You know, think about your electric bill or your water bill. A utility bill is something that you pay every single month as long as you want the service. If you don't pay, you don't have the service. And that's essentially what you've done with your car payment. Look, buying a car shouldn't be this complicated. We all know that it's not an investment. It's an object that we buy, that we use to get from where we're at to where we want to go. And it's going to cost us money. We're losing money on our cars. That is no secret. And you can see that leasing has some arguments for and against why it's good and why it's bad. And so far, we've just been talking about the surface level stuff. But now let's dig into the details of what's involved in the leasing process. From this point forward, when you hear lease, I want you to think about it as just another way to finance your vehicle, because that's exactly what leasing is. It's just another form of payment. And all the car buying rules apply the same. So negotiate your price. Keep everything separate. Don't talk about financing until you're sitting in the finance office. All of that is exactly the same. Now, I want to take time to answer a question from a subscriber, and this is from Manny. Manny asks, he has $3,000 of negative equity and thinking about putting it into a lease. What are your thoughts? Now, I've made a whole nother video about ways to deal with negative equity. And when it comes to negative equity, there's no magic potion. Negative equity never just disappears. And so if you roll it into a lease, you could do that, but just know that leases typically have a higher interest rate than traditional financing. You're still going to pay the negative equity. It sounds good at first because you get a new car, you get rid of your negative equity. But when you peel back the curtain, it's a terrible idea because you just spent $40,000 on a car that you should have spent $32,000. This new car is dropping in value. So when you go to get another car a couple years from now, you'll find that you're even further in the hole. So never roll negative equity into another deal, whether you're leasing it or you're buying it. Okay, so you've negotiated this deal like you would any other car deal, and you're sitting in the finance office. You have the purchase price locked in, you have your trade price locked in, and now you're ready to talk financing. Your purchase price minus your trade cost is how much this new vehicle is going to cost you. The next thing you need to know is the residual value of the vehicle. The residual value is the predetermined amount that the dealer thinks that the car is going to be worth at the end of your lease. So now that you have your residual value, you can figure out your capitalization cost, which is the amount financed. Remember, a lease is not like traditional financing, so it's going to be a lot of new terms that they're going to throw at you, and this is one of them. So your capitalization cost is just how much you're financing. It's the difference between the purchase price and the residual value. The next step is to determine your lease term in months, whether that's 24 or 36 or 48, whatever y'all determine, but you need this because your capitalized costs divided by your term is going to almost get you to what your monthly payment is. We have a few more things to add in there. The next step is to figure out what is it going to cost you to borrow this money. In a traditional auto loan, we think of it as an APR, annual percent rate. It's your interest rate, and it's presented as 2%, 5%, 10%, 20%. God, don't do that. But it's a percent. When it comes to leasing, they don't call it an interest rate. Actually, they have a couple different names. You may see it as your finance charge, your rent charge, your cost of capital, or the money factor. All of these different words mean the same thing. It's what you're going to pay to borrow that money. It's your interest rate. And you may have a guy look you dead in the eye and say, we ran your credit, we looked at everything, and we got you approved for a great money factor of 0.003. And if you're thinking in a traditional financing sense, you may think, wow, 0.003, that is amazing. Thank you, where do I sign? But when you do the calculation, you will find that that actually converts to 7.2% interest, which is not such a good deal anymore. And the way you figure that out is you take your money factor and you times it by 2,400, and that'll give you your interest rate. So a money factor of 0.001, which converts to 2.4% interest, is a lot better than 0.003. The last thing you want to have a crystal clear understanding of is what condition do the car need to be returned in and what's considered normal wear and tear, because this can really set you up for failure. Do you have to pay for every scratch, dent, and rock chip in the car? Is some of it considered normal wear and tear? What fees are involved? Do you have to have repairs done at the dealership, or can you use any body shop? This is all things that's in the lease and things that you need to make sure you understand so you're not hit with thousands of dollars in fees just to turn in the car. So now that you have your purchase price, your capitalization cost, your residual value, and your money factor, now you can put it together, and that's how you're going to come up with your monthly payment. But we still got some more to add in there, and that's your fees. Some of the fees are legit while others are bogus and just add profit to the dealer. And you should always understand every fee that you're paying, and you should agree with it. If you don't, walk away from the deal. Some of the fees that you're familiar with is document fees, but you may see something called an acquisition fee. And these fees can be as high as $700. And this is a fee that the dealer charged to prepare the lease. Personally, get that out of here. I'm not paying for that. It's typical for a lease to have a yearly mileage restriction, meaning you agree that you're only going to drive 10,000 or 15,000 miles per year. This is negotiable, so make sure that the mileage restriction fits within your lifestyle. But what's more important is that you understand what is the fee associated with going over the mileage, because this can be 10, 15, or 20 cents per mile. So you want to make sure you understand what this is, because this can add up quick. Another fee associated with leases is your early turn-in fee, where you want to get out of the lease ahead of schedule. You definitely want to understand what options and what cost is involved if you run into a situation where you have to get rid of the lease. And from here, mostly everything else you're going to run into is going to be typical to any car buying situation. Things like extended warranties, maintenance programs, nitrogen-filled tires, tint on the windows, undercoating, rust proofing, scratch protection. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on. Just know that all these other things you buy is going to make your monthly rate go up. So make sure you understand them and don't buy something that you don't understand. Let's switch gears and talk about the other end of this transaction, where the lease is expiring and it's time to get out of it. So if the lease is expiring and you've met all the conditions, the car is in great shape, it meets all the wear and tear criteria that's built into your original agreement, you're underneath the mileage, you're ready to just turn it in. If this is the case, you just turn the keys in and you're good. Walk away from it. Now you gotta go find another car somewhere, but this one is done. The second way is that you love the car so much you decide you're gonna keep it. And that's where your residual value is going to come in, because that residual value is what you need to pay in order to pay the car off in full and keep the car. So if you don't have the money to pay the residual value up front, then you have the option of going and financing that amount into a new loan, and you can keep driving the car. Now, word of caution here, you've already had the car for 3 or 4 years and you've been making payments on it. This is not the time to go and finance this residual value over 72 or 84 months. By the time you get this new loan paid off, that means you've been carrying a car payment for over a decade. But it is an option. The third option is you trade the car in for a different car. But if you decide you're going to trade the car, you have to be careful and watch the residual value, because if the trade-in value is less than the residual value, the dealer can then roll in that negative equity into your next deal. Don't sound fair, do it? Because it's not, but it can happen. So you have to be on the lookout for these type of things. Now let's talk about some of the other ways to get out of your lease. And unfortunately, people find themselves in this position where for whatever reason, they need to get out of this lease. They don't want the payments no more, or they can't afford them anymore. And you do have options in this situation. Probably the best option is where you go to the dealership, they run the numbers and say, you know what? We'll buy this car from you, cancel the lease, no fees, you can walk away clean. Now, this is not always going to happen, but it's worth the effort to check into it, because if you can make it happen, it's probably the easiest and cleanest way to get out of a lease ahead of schedule. Another option you have at your disposal is using a third-party company, something like Swap a Lease, where you list your lease for sale and you find somebody to take over the payments. The third option you have, which a lot of people don't think about, is that you can sell the car. You can sell the car to the dealer, you can sell the car to anybody at any time. Call your finance company and ask them, what do I owe you today if I want to be done with this whole deal? And they'll look it up and they'll give you a number. So you take your buyout number plus your residual value, and there you have what you need to come up with in order to get out of the lease. So if you sell the car to someone, then you have to be able to come up with that amount of money before they can get the title. So this may not be a popular option, but it is an option, especially if you look up the value of the car and the value of the car is higher than both your buyout plus your residual value. Again, this is a way to sell the car at any time, maybe break even or even come out ahead. But we know how cars work, and most likely you're going to be upside down and you're going to have to deal with some negative equity. But it is an option for you. As you can see, leasing a car is simple in theory, but it gets complicated real fast, primarily because there's a lot of terminology that's different and unique from the traditional financing world. But at the end of the day, you're just financing a car. And I thank Jeremy for the video idea. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on leasing. Leave those in the comments section below. As for me, I'm in the camp of it's the most expensive way to drive a vehicle, and I prefer my vehicles sitting in my driveway, paid off in full, and using that money to invest and build my wealth. Until next time, I'm Diamond. Peace.